It was a warm summer evening in Brentwood when I got home from the office. Working long hours as a marketing manager was exhausting, but coming home to David made it all worth it. "Honey, I'm home," I called out as I kicked off my heels. David emerged from the kitchen, that dazzling smile on his face that never failed to make my heart skip a beat. He pulled me into a big hug and planted a kiss on my cheek. "Welcome back, babe. Dinner's almost ready." We chatted about our days over a meal of David's famous spaghetti bolognese. He regaled me with stories about closing a huge deal on a Beverly Hills mansion. I couldn't help but feel proud of my husband, the hotshot real estate agent. After dinner, we curled up on the couch to watch our favorite show. I nestled my head on David's shoulder, soaking in his warmth and familiar scent. In moments like these, with his strong arms wrapped around me, I felt so content and lucky. Little did I know, my perfect life was a fragile illusion, teetering on the edge of collapse. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing little things. David working late more often, getting secretive phone calls, household bills creeping up unexpectedly. At first, I dismissed them, chalking it up to the stresses of his busy job. But the nagging doubts took root. One day, I stumbled upon David's briefcase lying open, with credit card statements and hotel receipts sticking out. I know I shouldn't have pride, but curiosity got the better of me. What I found made my blood run cold: charges for a hotel in Las Vegas and plane tickets for two. When David came home that night, I was waiting for him, clutching the damning evidence in my trembling hands. When David walked through the door that night, I was waiting for him on the couch, the hotel and plane ticket receipts clutched in my shaking hands. "What's going on, babe?" he asked with a confused look. I couldn't even look him in the eye as I thrust the papers towards him. "Care to explain these?" David's face drained of color as he scanned the receipts. He opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. Finally, he sighed deeply. "Mary, I don't know what to say except that I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" I spat out, feeling the anger and hurt boiling up inside me. "You're sorry for what exactly?" "For going behind my back, for lying to me." David ran his fingers through his hair anxiously. "It's complicated. I've been seeing someone else." Those words felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I was frozen in shock and disbelief. "How could you do this to me?" I managed to choke out through the tears now streaming down my face. "After everything we've been through together, I loved you with every fiber of my being." "I know, and I'm a terrible person," David said, his eyes glistening with remorse. "This woman, we have a child together. Those tickets were for me to go see them in Vegas." My world came crashing down in that moment. Not only had my husband betrayed me in the worst way, but he had secretly fathered a child with another woman using my hard-earned money. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Get out of my house right now." So many more questions raced through my mind. How long had this been going on? Who was this other woman? But I couldn't bear to hear any more lies and excuses. David opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "Just go. I can't even look at you." With slumped shoulders, he grabbed his coat and trudged out the door without another word. I collapsed onto the couch, consumed by wave after wave of anguish as my life crumbled around me. The days and weeks after David's confession were a blur of heartbreak and turmoil. I could barely drag myself out of bed, let alone focus on work. Every corner of our once happy home mocked me with memories of the beautiful lie I had been living. David kept calling and texting, begging me to let him explain, to give him another chance. But I couldn't bear to lay eyes on him after the depth of his betrayal. How could I ever trust the man who had built our entire relationship on deception? One night, my phone rang shrilly, shattering the silence of my lonely apartment. It was a number I didn't recognize, but against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello." A woman's voice, laced with venom. "Mary, I'm Sarah, David's other woman." My blood ran cold. This was the person who had helped rip my life to shreds. She laughed cruelly. "I know all about you and your pathetic little fantasy marriage. Did you really think David could ever be fully happy with an icy workaholic shrew like you?" White-hot fury burned through my veins as the pieces started clicking into place. This Sarah knew everything. She was the one David had betrayed me with, the mother of his child. "I'm the one who really knows him, the real him," she taunted. "And let me tell you, our son is going to grow up to be just like his daddy, a man who gets whatever he wants." I wanted to hurl the phone across the room, but I forced myself to remain calm and catch her in her twisted game. "So you admit it then? You've been sleeping with my husband and letting him use my money to support your sick little family." There was a brief pause before Sarah responded with a low chuckle. "Oh honey, it goes much deeper than that." It was clear then that these two reprehensible people were committed to ruining what little remained of my life. My heart wrenched painfully, but a cold numbness was also setting in. I would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. They wanted to play dirty. So be it. They had no idea what kind of hell they had unleashed. In the days following Sarah's chilling phone call, I became increasingly paranoid. I would jolt awake at every creak and thump, terrified that David or his deranged mistress might be lurking in the shadows. My friends and family urged me to go to the police, but I didn't know what I could even tell them without sounding completely unhinged. Plus, a part of me still desperately hoped that David might come to his senses and end this nightmare himself. Then one afternoon, a plain manila envelope was slipped under my door. My heart pounded as I tore it open to find a handwritten letter. "Mary, I know you're hurting and angry, and you have every right to be. But please, let me explain everything before you do anything rash. Meet me at the Brentwood Country Mart tomorrow at noon, and I'll lay all the cards on the table. I promise. Come alone. This is between us. D." Against my better judgment, some deep-rooted part of me still longed for answers, for closure, for an end to the mind-numbing chaos my life had become. The next day, trying to appear nonchalant yet utterly failing, I headed to the country mart at the appointed hour. David was already seated at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee waiting. "Thank you for coming," he said somberly as I took a seat across from him. I crossed my arms, putting up an emotional barrier. "Talk. You owe me that much." David leaned in close, his expression turning grave. "Mary, I'm in deep, deep trouble. When I started seeing Sarah years ago, I just couldn't resist her. She's like this force of nature." He rubbed his temples wearily. "At first, it was just a fling. But then she got pregnant with my child, and that's when things went off the rails." I felt bile rising in my throat. The thought of David being intimate with that vile woman made me ill. "Sarah, she's not stable, Mary," he continued, his voice hushed. "She's been blackmailing me for years, bleeding me dry just to see my son. If I don't give her what she wants, she threatens to turn my life upside down." David looked up at me then, his eyes full of fear and desperation. "That's why I've been stealing money from work, taking out loans, everything. She's a pit I can't crawl out of." As much as I longed to spit in his face, the broken, haunted look in his eyes gave me pause. Maybe he truly was a victim being manipulated and abused. "What does she want from me?" I asked, almost afraid to know the answer. David's face turned ashen. She wants you out of the picture. For good." My blood turned to ice in my veins. I knew in that instant that this disturbed woman was deadly serious. She and David had concocted some kind of sinister plot to erase me from the picture permanently. Panic gripped me as I realized the terrible danger I was in, but a strange calmness also settled over me, an instinctual need to survive that pushed aside the hurt and anger. David reached across the table then, taking my hand in his clammy grip. "Mary, you have to get out of here, as far away as possible. Please, let me make this right before it's too late." I stared back at him, searching those familiar eyes for any hint of the man I had loved, any reason to trust him again. What I saw was the stark desperation of someone coming undone. As sickening revelations threatened to spill out, I wrenched my hand from his grasp. "No more lies, David. If you really want to make this right, you'll tell me everything." I knew that whatever happened next, my life could never return to how it used to be, but I had been backed into a corner, and I wasn't going down without a fight. After David's chilling confession at the country mart, my world shifted into a surreal blur. He had begged me to go into hiding while he tried to reason with his deranged mistress Sarah. But how could I ever trust him again after all his lies? I drove around aimlessly for hours, my mind racing. Part of me still couldn't process that my life was now in grave danger from these two sick individuals. What had I ever done to them besides love David? Eventually, sheer exhaustion forced me to pull over. With trembling hands, I called the only person I could think of, my best friend Jess. "Hello? Mary, is everything okay?" She could instantly sense the panic in my voice. Between ragged breaths, I relayed every horrific detail: David's infidelity, the secret child, Sarah's unhinged vendetta against me. "Jess, I don't know what to do. I'm so scared." There was a pause before she responded resolutely. "Listen to me. You're going to pack a bag and come stay with me and Mike right now. We'll figure this out together, I promise." Relief washed over me at having my closest friend in my corner during this nightmare. I wiped my eyes and took a steadying breath. Okay, I'm on my way." An hour later, I was enveloped in Jess's comforting embrace as soon as I reached her doorstep. Mike took my bag and gave me a solemn nod. "You're safe here, Mary. We've got your back," Jess said firmly. Over mugs of chamomile tea, I recounted every twist and turn, seeing the shock and revulsion play across their faces. Mike's jaw clenched with anger when I got to the part about Sarah's psychotic plot against me. "Have you gone to the police yet?" Mike asked gruffly. I shook my head, sudden tears stinging my eyes. "No, I didn't know what to tell them or if they'd even believe me." Jess reached across and squeezed my hand. "Of course they'll believe you, honey. What that witch is doing is criminal." She turned to Mike then. "Babe, maybe you should give your buddy at the precinct a call, just to be safe." Mike nodded resolutely and whipped out his phone. A short while later, there was a firm rap on the door. Two police detectives strode in, their expressions grave yet professional. After listening intently to my harrowing story, the older one spoke up. "Ms. Thompson, we don't take threats like these lightly. In cases of potential domestic violence, we have procedures to remove you from any hazardous situations." The female detective piped up. "If you can provide us with any evidence you have, emails, texts, recordings, it will help build a strong case against this Sarah woman and your husband." A surge of gratitude washed over me that I was finally being taken seriously. These officers seemed to recognize the true danger I was facing. "We can take you somewhere safe tonight while we launch an investigation," the older detective said. "But I need to warn you, pursuing this legally could turn your whole life upside down." I knew he was right. My comfortable existence was already shattered into a million pieces. but a renewed sense of determination bloomed within me. If it was the only way to survive this nightmare, I would do whatever it took. "You don't understand," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "My life is already upside down. At least this way, maybe I can get some justice." So with a small bag of personal items and the support of my best friends, I followed the detectives into the night, leaving my tainted home and marriage behind to face an uncertain future. It was my only path to survival. The days and weeks after leaving my home behind blurred together. The police had set me up in a safe house, a nondescript apartment across town, as they launched their investigation into David and Sarah. I was advised to stay put and lay low until they could ensure my safety. Part of me still couldn't believe the waking nightmare my life had become, consumed by fear and the gut-wrenching sense of betrayal by the man I loved more than anything. At night, I would toss and turn, haunted by David's panicked eyes and the realization that this woman he had been seeing was dangerously unstable. Every few days, the two detectives working my case would stop by the safe house to update me on any new developments and ask follow-up questions. From the tight-lipped frowns and clipped responses, it was clear that untangling David and Sarah's web of lies and deceit would be no easy feat. "We've uncovered evidence that your husband David has been embezzling funds from his real estate company," Detective Harris stated grimly one afternoon as his partner Detective Garcia looked on, "using that money to pay off this Sarah woman and support their child." My heart sank at the depths of David's betrayal. Not only had he cheated on me emotionally and violated the sacred vows of our marriage, he had been criminally robbing me financially as well. That's just sickening." I managed through the lump in my throat. "What about this plan they had against me? Have you found anything on that?" Detective Garcia's expression turned grave. "We're still digging into that. But based on your statement and the threats this Sarah made, it appears they were conspiring to stage a home invasion scene to make it look like a botched robbery." "You mean, they were going to try to kill me?" The words felt like shards of glass in my mouth. The detectives exchanged a weighted look before Detective Harris responded soberly. "That's our working theory, yes. This Sarah seems to have an extremely disturbing fixation on removing you from the picture by any means necessary." My head spun with despair and disbelief. How had I been so blind and naive? How could someone I loved be capable of such evil? In that moment, as I stared at the pained, sympathetic expressions of the two detectives, I felt the weight of my world fully collapse around me. As the officers went over other findings in the case, I could barely process it all. Debts, lies, affairs spanning years. It was all so dizzying. Part of me wondered if any of the memories and love I shared with David were even real. When the detectives left that day, I curled up on the dingy apartment sofa, my body racked with sobs of grief, anger, and fear. I had lost everything: my home, my husband, my entire sense of self and security. But as the tears finally subsided, a different feeling stirred in me, a sense of grim resilience and cold determination. If David and his twisted partner wanted to destroy me, I would meet that darkness head-on and fight back by any means necessary. That was the only way I would be able to survive and rebuild my life from the smoldering ashes around me. No more would I be the helpless victim. It was time to fight for my life and regain control. The road ahead would be brutal, but I steeled myself to follow it through to the bitter end, whatever it took. My reckoning was coming. The day of David and Sarah's trial arrived like a gathering storm. I had spent weeks anxiously awaiting this moment, alternating between feverish nights replaying their betrayals and steeling my resolve to face them in court. Detective Garcia came to escort me from the safe house that morning. "You ready for this, Mary?" she asked with a steady gaze. I took a deep breath and gave a resolute nod. As much as I dreaded laying eyes on those two reprehensible people again, I knew this was my sole chance to stand up and have my voice heard. The courthouse was a hushed, intimidating space when we arrived. I could feel dozens of eyes sizing me up as we waited to be called in. Part of me still couldn't believe this was my reality, having to testify against my own husband in a sordid case of deceit and violence. Finally, the courtroom doors swung open and we made our way inside. David was already there, sitting rigidly beside his lawyer in a somber suit. Our eyes met for a split second before I quickly averted my gaze, a sickening mixture of anger, grief, and visceral disgust roiling inside me. Sarah entered next, her face twisted into a permanent sneer as she locked eyes with me. I felt a chill run down my spine. This woman's hatred for me burned brighter than the sun. The trial kicked off with opening statements, the prosecutor laying out the disturbing facts: David's years-long infidelity, the embezzlement of funds, the secret child, and ultimately the sinister plot to orchestrate a home invasion gone awry to do away with me. I watched as David slumped lower in his seat, the weight of his sins pressing down on him. Good, I thought bitterly. Let him drown in the consequences of his craven actions. When it was my turn to take the stand, I found reserves of strength from some deep well within me. I recalled in vivid, unflinching detail the lies, the betrayal, the threats to my life. At one point, Sarah's lawyer attempted to shake me, to paint me as a spurned woman seeking vengeance. Isn't it possible you're fabricating these lurid claims out of anger at your husband's wandering eye? The slick lawyer asked with an arched brow. I felt a red-hot fury rise up from my core as I leaned in close. You can try to twist this any way you want, but the truth is I almost lost my life because of the depravity of those two people, I said, my voice low and dripping with disdain as I gestured at David and Sarah. I'm not angry. I'm furious at the sheer evil I've been subjected to by those I loved and trusted most. There were some murmurs in the gallery, but I held my steely gaze until the shaken lawyer backed down. Over the next few days, the evidence mounted: recorded threats from Sarah, financial records of the embezzlement, even a hand-drawn diagram of their plans to stage the home invasion. It was a damning, undeniable trail of deceit, greed, and violence. When the case finally went to the jury, it took them less than a day to return with their verdict: guilty on all charges for both David and Sarah. In that moment, something inside me finally broke free after years shackled by lies and fear. I watched, devoid of any cupidity, as a bailiff shackled my husband and led him away. Sarah fought and screamed furiously, that same hatred-filled glare piercing my soul. But it was finally over. The two tangled, toxic forces that had turned my life upside down could no longer harm me. I was free, unshackled, reborn. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, the warm sunshine on my face, I realized the woman who had entered was no more. What was left was someone tougher, more resilient, and thrillingly alive. My vindication was complete. The days and weeks after the trial were a swirling haze. I felt unmoored, untethered from the life I had once known so intimately. My home, my marriage, my sense of self. It had all been stripped away by David and Sarah's vile betrayal. At times, waves of anger and bitterness would crash over me, leaving me crushed beneath the weight of what I had endured. How could the man I loved have been so monstrous? How could I have been so blind to the reality crumbling around me? But then a strange calm would eventually settle over me, a growing acceptance that I had been through a harrowing crucible and emerged on the other side, irrevocably changed but powerfully alive. With the legal turmoil finally behind me, it was time to begin the arduous process of rebuilding my life from the ashes. I decided to start fresh by leaving Brentwood and the tainted memories it held. I landed a new marketing job in San Francisco and moved into a cozy apartment with a view of the bay. On that first night, as I sat on my little balcony watching the lights of the city twinkling to life, I felt a profound sense of peace and possibility wash over me. Gone were the suffocating lies, the dramas, the dark whispers of conspiracy and violence that had choked the very life from me. What remained was the essence of who I truly was. A strong, resilient woman who had walked through hell, but refused to let the monsters win. In the days and months that followed, I slowly rediscovered parts of myself I had forgotten existed beneath the rubble of betrayal. I connected with old friends, explored new hobbies and passions. A brilliant, vibrant tapestry of life began unfolding before me. Of course, the scars of what I went through never fully faded. Some nights I would wake in a cold sweat, David's voice echoing in my nightmares, Sarah's hateful glare searing into me. The wounds went bone deep, but I learned to accept those lingering shadows as part of who I now was, a survivor emboldened by the darkness rather than crippled by it. Time may dull the worst of the anguish, but moments of despair would always be refugees in my soul. It was all part of the brutal yet resilient cycle of life, death, and rebirth. I had been broken down to my most primal essence, only to be reborn as someone tougher, wiser, and thrillingly alive. That was the ultimate victory, to transform my anguish and fear into a renewed lust for living, fueled by an indomitable spirit that refused to be extinguished. With each new dawn, I awoke grateful to greet another day in this harsh yet endlessly captivating world. I was no longer a victim shackled by the past, but a battle-tested survivor blazing a new trail into the great unknown. My existence was a miraculous fluke, and I intended to wring every last drop of sweetness from it. The monsters of yesterday held no power over me. I was finally, gloriously free. So what did you think of Mary's harrowing tale of betrayal, danger, and powerful resilience in the face of darkness? In your own life, have you ever had to overcome profound hurt or trauma? How did you persevere and find the strength to keep going? The human capacity for growth after hardship never ceases to amaze. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to our channel, give us a like, share our story. I'll see you soon with another captivating story.